Thanks for attending today's session. We're proud to be sponsoring the Provincial Speaker Series once again. Manulife has more than 9,000 employees in Ontario, and 1/3 of those are based in the Canadian headquarters here in KW. Although we have more than 130 years of success in Canada, we continue to transform our business in becoming the most digital, customer-centric global company in our industry. We are privileged to be part of the innovative community here in KW. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, the Honourable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. He was first elected as the MPP for Leeds-Grenville in 2010 and re-elected in 2011 and 2014. In 2018, he was re-elected as the MPP for the newly named riding of Leeds-Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes. Steve gained attention across Canada in 1982, when at the age of 22 and just out of university, he was elected Mayor of Brockville, and I found out it was the University of Waterloo at the table. He served 3 terms as mayor, and during his tenure was also the president of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Prior to his election as Leeds-Grenville MPP, Steve was Chief Administrative Officer for the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. Steve has been a community volunteer for more than 35 years. A proponent of education and physical fitness, Steve also helped raise $1.3 million for the Thousand Islands Secondary School track facility, one of the largest fundraising accomplishments for a public educational institution to date in the region. Steve is also married and a father of 5 children and 3 grandchildren. Please join me in welcoming the Honourable Steve Clark to the stage.
Thanks very much, Andrew, for that kind introduction. And I have to tell you that since that bio was written, I now have a 4th grandchild. So it's a busy house, I'll tell you. I'm just so thrilled to be back here in the city and in the area. As was mentioned, prior to my election in 1982, I was a student and a graduate at the University of Waterloo. And I just want to ask a question. Did anybody in this room go to university with me or knew me when I was here in the region? Good. Nobody's here. Great. Phew. The reason is my chief of staff said that the Kitchener-Waterloo Record wanted to interview me, and I just wanted to make sure nobody did any other interview that other than what Andrew said. The last time I was here, actually, I was the special guest, the surprise guest for Minister Rod Phillips, Ontario's Minister of Finance, at your first provincial event. I just made the announcement about the regional government review in London, and was actually coming back here for a wedding. A family wedding. So we were at Westmount and spent the weekend here. So I got to do my pre-wedding work here at this wonderful event. And I want to thank you for inviting me back. I also want to acknowledge that earlier today we had an exceptional roundtable. Many of the things I'm going to talk about today we touched upon at the roundtable. I had my colleague, MPP Belinda Karahaliolis, here with me for that area, and I want to thank both her and all of our members on both sides of the House for all the work that they do representing this fine region. And I also want to acknowledge your worships from Waterloo and Cambridge for being here today. Dave and Catherine, I just want to thank you for all the engagement that we've had, not just today, but every time I'm in the Waterloo region and back in a place that I have very, very fond memories of. So thank you both for being here, and thank you to the other members of council who are here as well. I really appreciate, as Minister of Municipal Affairs, the work that you do to serve your constituents. So thank you, and let's give them a round of applause. I want to take the opportunity to again thank the Chamber of Commerce for the roundtable, but more importantly for the tremendous advocacy that you do for businesses in the region. And I want to thank you for having such a well-attended and such a top-notch program. And I again pledge to you that as you champion innovation and prosperity, you have a friend in me in the Government of Ontario. So if there's anything I can do to help further some of the good work that you do, my door is always open. Our government's doing some very, very exciting things to connect people to places, make life more affordable, prepare people for jobs, and create a much more competitive business environment. And we're doing this on a number of fronts. But one of the things that I like to talk about, because it's important for me as the minister involved in the planning regime in Ontario, is we're trying to cut red tape. We're trying to lower the cost of business, and we want to make it more simpler and more cost-effective for businesses to operate in the province. And that's a very hard thing for a government to try to implement in a very rigorous agenda at Queen's Park. Reducing and simplifying the regulatory burden in Ontario to help support job growth, more investment, is something that all of us in Cabinet and in government take very seriously. We have to be doing something right, because recently the Canadian Federation of Independent Business gave us an A- in their 2020 Red Tape Report Card. It's the highest we've ever had, and it's now on its second year. So I appreciate the work that CFIB does on behalf of many of the people who are in this room. One of the issues that came up this morning, and again, it's an issue that for some time the greater Kitchener-Waterloo area has been not just the hub for innovation, but as well for the financial and professional business sector, and a significant amount of manufacturing still takes place in the Waterloo region. These employers, as we all know, bring great jobs, prosperity, and a huge investment into this very fast-growing region. But one of the things that I heard this morning, and that we hear in every corner of the province, is that many of our communities are facing a significant labor shortage. There are significant high-paying jobs that remain unfilled in this region and right across the province. A report by the Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin found that more than half of employers surveyed in this area had positions that were difficult to fill, many of them in the manufacturing and construction sector. And when I saw that statistic, I went back to my own Workforce Development Board, and I was shocked that that similar number takes place both in a fast-growing area like Waterloo Region and a more, as I will call it, more modest growth in the very rural Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes. And I have to tell you, that is the longest name in the legislature, and I have to be very mindful where I am in my riding, depending on whether I want to accentuate the Thousand Islands or the Rideau Lakes. I was actually last weekend standing on the frozen Rideau Lakes at a speed skating, so I had to accentuate the fact that the Rideau Lakes were a very important aspect. So as a government, what we're trying to do to combat that shortage of jobs and skilled trades being plugged into those unfilled jobs, we had a campaign as a government to attract more people to skilled trades and encourage more employers to hire apprentices. And I was very encouraged to hear from Ian that the Honourable Monte McNaughton was here last week, and he has done just a tremendous job in shining a light on the very important career that skilled trades are for our young men and our young women. And I want to thank Minister McNaughton for the work that he's done with his listening tour, and I'm glad, given the significant shortage outlined by the Workforce Development Board, that he made a stop in Waterloo Region. Our government's committed to ensuring that everyone, no matter where they live, can find a good job and also have a plan in place by a government to make life more affordable for them. Last month we had a significant conference in the province. It was the Rural Ontario Municipal Association. The mayors and the councillors know we call that the Roma Conference. And it's very important because both the Premier and Minister Erding Hardeman talked about a program that I think is very important for some of our smaller, more rural communities, and that's the Rural Economic Development Program. It helps rural municipalities across the province help with investment, creating jobs, and creating the conditions to make them more investment ready. And I think that's an extremely important part. As well, last year we launched our new regional development programs. Minister Fideli did it here in the Southwest. I had the honor of doing it on behalf of our government in Eastern Ontario. And it's all about taking a more coordinated approach to support business growth in Southwestern Ontario. And it's very important. The one thing I heard over and over again is, yes, and I heard it this morning, there needs to be some form of incentives, but we also need to be able to support our communities to become investment ready. And I think these new regional development programs take that more coordinated approach. Growth does bring its own challenges, and we all know that in this region it's one of the fastest growing. It's expected to rise by, I'm told, by over 185,000 people over the next 15 years. I heard from Steve at Google this morning about the great opportunities that we have just across the street to add thousands of more jobs to the region. So we have to be able to plan for that significant growth. And we're working with our municipal partners, both here and throughout the Greater Golden Horseshoe, to plan for that growth. For example, that's why in 2019 we made changes to A Place to Grow, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, to help municipalities build more housing near major transit station areas. And it was one of those principles that we heard over and over again as we did the consultation. And it actually permeated into every single consultation I did. When we worked on our Housing Supply Action Plan, that was a consistent message that we received, that we needed to intensify and have more housing opportunities near MTSAs. And speaking of transportation, we know that we need to have that reliable transit and transportation network to get to where we need to go quick and easy. And I, at the round table today, and as I will do to you, I will swear allegiance to two-way all-day go, and I know Ian was going to make me do it at the round table. And I was saying, I'll go off script, and I'll say that, when I was coming here in university 40 years ago, my father was a CN employee, so I had the infamous red pass, and I would take the train often. And I remember complaining to my father as a teenager, why do I have to wait so long at Union Station between these trains? Why can't we have a more coordinated system? Well, 40 years later, what did I hear at the round table from business leaders? This whole 6-hour commute for a 1-hour meeting. So, I think you've heard enough of politicians talking about announcing, and I think the priority for our government is actually implementing. And I think that's one of the things that I certainly heard loud and clear every time I come here, is that we've had enough of politicians standing, pledging things. We actually want to see, shovels in the ground, and we actually want to see implementation. And that's the message that I'll take back to Queen's Park. The other issue that I want to talk about is something that we created because of A Place to Grow. And that's this whole concept of provincially significant employment zones, or PZEDs. And these are lands that are in areas where we require strategic economic development investment. They're normally located in transportation corridors. They've got infrastructure there, like MTSAs or highways, and they have significant employment and employment potential. But they're always vulnerable for other uses, like converting to residential. And I think one of the things that we've been able to create by creating those 31 provincially significant employment zones, 3 of which are in the region, is to be able to unlock and use those lands by also still having a plan in place to unlock residential development. And it's that key balance that I think the growth plan provided by creating the concept of PZEDs, or provincially significant employment zones. Yes, we've got hundreds of requests out there by our municipal partners, and we're working through them for the next iteration of PZ announcements. But I thought it was very important, given the significant economic development role that this region plays to the province, that 3 of the 31, it's no surprise that they're in this region. I also touched on some of the other consultations that we've done. And one of the biggest consultations we had as a government was when we consulted for our Housing Supply Action Plan, More Homes, More Choice. We want to put affordable home ownership in reach of Ontario families and provide people the opportunities to live closer to where they work. It's a simple concept, but it's something that we heard all through the province, no matter what corner we were in, that we needed to put a flexible plan in place to build the right type of housing in the right place at a price people can afford. Last year, we published 4 extremely unique guides, and there were about 4 different subjects to help municipalities and just interested people look at other options. And we had tremendous uptake to our innovation guides on tiny homes, second suites, co-ownership, and life leases. And we're right in the midst of looking at our next bill or next initiative regarding the Housing Supply Action Plan. So if anyone has any other innovative ideas that they think we should explore, again, my door is always open. But we had incredible uptake on those 4 existing guides. You know, one of the things, though, that we heard consistently from home builders since taking office is that there's too much red tape. There's too many delays to get shovels in the ground. And that's why our government are trying to cut red tape, cut that unnecessary and duplicative red tape that slows down approvals and takes years to get very, very good projects moving forward and built. We're also investing in critical infrastructure in our rural communities, and I was so proud last month that Premier Ford announced our $200 million investment in the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. And about $2 million of that fund that was announced will go to small communities right here in Waterloo Region this year. You know, I'm going to conclude by talking about the subject that I was sort of showcased for Minister Phillips. Some might say I was cover because of the fact that when he was here, I made the announcement about the regional government review. And I know that the City of Kitchener recently passed a motion asking that I make the results of that review public. And as I said, and as I know that some people might feel that that's a good idea, I was pretty clear. I was clear then, and I'll be clear today, that we received that advice as confidential advice to Cabinet. We decided that we would pick a path of 5 points that I outlined when I was there, and that's the path that we're going to choose as a government. And we've had tremendous work cooperatively by our municipal partners since I was here in October. We had an announcement that we were going to provide up to $125 million for our municipal partners for the extension of the Municipal Modernization Fund. We received, since I was here in October, over 300 applications. And last month at Roma, I announced as a fast track all 27 joint applications between municipalities, including one right here. It was a collaboration between the townships of North Dumfries, Wellesley and Woolwich, and also the township of Wilmot, which was led by them, to conduct a joint service delivery review. That's exactly what we heard during the regional government review, as people wanted to see more communities working together on some common services. People remember that when I announced that last January, we looked at 3 lenses: service delivery, decision-making, and governance. And I always talked about service delivery first. This grant to those townships show our commitment to the governments, and it also shows a political will by those municipalities to work together to try to provide efficient and effective service to their taxpayers. So hats off to those townships and all of the other communities. We also announced in October that we were going to extend the Audit and Accountability Fund, which was that fund that all 39 large urban municipalities took advantage of, 100% uptake. The municipalities that were eligible here in the Kitchener-Waterloo area all took it, again, with the lens of looking at their effectiveness and also reducing their costs. And I know the municipal officials work hard. They work very diligently to provide those services. You know, we announced over $350 million in new funding to help those communities keep taxes low, but at the same time provide those services. So that's the path we've taken, and I can argue now that I've had from October to today to show the success that we've already received. And I've already talked to the Kitchener Chamber of Commerce about some of the other concerns that you had that day that I was here in October. Things like the fact that we're streamlining our building process. You know, I'm going to take a serious look at any municipality, especially here in Waterloo Region where you're so fast growing, that if you are wanting to look at your development approval process and you as a business community think that your community should, then I'm quite willing to put that homework assignment on your municipal council. So if that's something that you think should be part of the next iteration of the Audit and Accountability Fund, I'd be more than happy to put that forward. So with that, that's my short address. We're going to do the fireside chat with no fire, and there's the hot seat. I don't see any mechanism there to turn up the heat, but we'll see. So anyways, thank you.
Yep. I think they're working. There you go. Let's just start with the municipal review process, because I think you touched on this, and without going through chapter and verse, I would say that the business community was interested in that for a lot of the reasons you described. How to get decisions quicker, just the efficiency in decision making that affects business. Maybe talk a little bit about that aspect of it, because that to me is the critical component of where, from a business or from a business lens, that was the important part of being able to streamline decision making, get quicker decision making and efficiencies that way.
It's a great question. So when I left Roma, the Roma conference, and after I announced the 27 joint projects were actually going to be fast-tracked and every single one of them were going to be improved, I heard a very resounding comment from our municipal partners about wanting to share our vision to be open for business. And it was something that I heard across the province during the regional government review, the meetings I had with local communities, talked about being open for business and about, it was great that we were looking at the development approval process. It was great that we were putting a plan in place to try to streamline it, but there was a feeling that one of the things that was lost from the process was the fact that there was an opportunity for us to have our municipal partners do the same thing. So after Roma, and after I got that feedback from municipalities, I went back to my staff and said, let's look at all those 300 applications that were remaining, and let's look at it with a view of what could be the next level of approval. So we decided, and we're still in the process of reviewing the applications, but we're definitely looking at the next approval level to be those communities who want to be open for business and want to look at their planning and development approval process to see if there's an opportunity to streamline. So that's my next homework, and obviously it might become homework for local councils, but it's again something that I think is extremely important. We're all in this together. We have a tremendous opportunity, certainly with my housing hat on. We've got 3 levels of government and a minority federal parliament. I think we've got a real opportunity to work across 3 levels of government and actually provide some real gains in housing and affordable housing and attainable housing if we all work together. But we can't have one level looking at streamlining and the other 2 not. So I think that might be the next municipal homework that we have. And it's certainly something that I heard from your business community today, and something I heard back in October that they felt I needed to put my mind toward.
Now, you have already taken the ethanol pledge, which in our case is all-day two-way GO service, and the commitment of this government.
Yeah, it was like the first thing they asked.
Yeah, I know. So. Yeah, it was right on cue. Our municipalities are asking that for a number of different reasons. You heard the issues at our roundtable around getting talent to the jobs that are available, community building, housing issues. There's a lot of different reasons. Many other communities are looking for that connectivity between communities. But the importance of inner city between here and Toronto, but also the inner city transit, like the once you're inside, so you have that end-to-end ability to get where you need to go, either as a citizen or as a worker trying to get to your job. There's, in terms of from your lens as municipal housing and our municipal affairs and housing, that's an important piece of being able to have development in communities right along the innovation corridor. Maybe talk a little bit about the things the lens that you put on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's, last week I spoke at the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board, and I was there along with Associate Minister of Transportation, Kinga Surma. It was actually the same day that Minister Mulroney spoke at the Economic Club, and I think we're all saying the same thing. I believe that transit and housing go hand in hand. And I think if we're going to have this huge investment for transit improvements, we have to work together. You have to have the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, who looks after the land use planning in the province, work with municipal partners on ensuring that we not only build transit fast and not just announce over and over again that we'll make a commitment, but we also need to work with our municipal partners on ensuring that there are transit-oriented communities. And I think this whole concept of transit-oriented communities gives us an opportunity to work with municipalities on what's needed in their area. I think to have complete communities around major transit station areas, I think is very, very important. And we need to have this whole of government approach. It can't just be a transportation issue. I've got to become involved. And I think some of the speeches and some of the feedback we received last week is the fact that we need to put a legislative plan in place to make that happen. And I think Minister Mulroney indicated that very strongly at the Economic Club, that's a priority of our government moving forward.
Well, and I think connected to what we talked about, an all-day two-way go, it's one thing to get the trains as an example, but I think you're right. All-day two-way go is about freeing up roads for moving goods to market. So freeing up the highways so that our manufacturing sector can get goods to market as well. So connected to in terms of getting transit approvals, what you also then have is all the municipalities along the corridor may have different bylaws and different ways of addressing things like off-peak deliveries and when, getting goods to market that last hour, which gets, so that's connected to transit, because if you've got more room, you want to get goods to market. But there's inconsistencies between municipalities. So maybe touch on that. That's an important part of making sure we don't hit the silos between municipalities in different jurisdictions.
It goes back again to the concept of what we're trying to create, and that's we want to make sure that as we build transit, that we have a complete community discussion with the local council. And the roundtable that we had this morning was very compelling. The gentleman from Conestoga Meats that talked about 80 transports a day going into Toronto, and the decision to just because of the transportation stress, moving that trip from 6 a.m. to 5 a.m. to 4 a.m. and wanting to understand whether the government will put together a connected transportation system that helps them get their goods to where they need to go. So it's a big problem, and I think traditionally we've looked at just having the Ministry of Transportation lead that discussion. I think we've got to get it right down to that municipal level, the fact that there are going to be differences every council, but there's also going to be differences at every station. And I subscribe to the view that one size doesn't fit all in terms of transportation needs in different communities. There's different businesses, different industries, different movement of people and products, and I think we have to be sympathetic that one size doesn't fit all. But certainly municipalities in the business community are looking for leadership from their government, and I think we are in a position now where we know that we have to be a little more forceful to be able to leverage the investment. And that's what it's all about. It's about leveraging the investment. The Toronto investment, for subways is $28.5 billion. So why would I not want to leverage that asset by making sure there's affordable housing or long-term care or student housing or libraries or community centers? Why would I not want to make sure we're leveraging that investment to having a complete community? And I think the same goes once you go out of Toronto and look at all of the communities in the Greater Golden Horseshoe. You need to take that same lens. As you build and as you improve, you have to look at how we can best work in this whole of government approach. And I have to be a partner with that.
Moving on to affordability of housing. And last year, you tabled and passed Bill 108. That was the start of, trying to address the what I think most would say is certainly a serious problem, if not a crisis, around the high cost of housing and affordability. It's not just confined to the GTA, by the way. I mean, I think with the Green Belt, I mean, we're seeing, which in some ways is a good thing, but will have its issues as well, rising housing costs here in the region of Waterloo, affordability of housing and affordable housing, low-income housing. What's next in your review of the municipal or the provincial legislative framework to try and deal with some of those affordability issues?
The Housing Supply Action Plan is and was a plan that I realized right from the day it received royal assent that you're not one and done. I didn't have, a bunch of people pat me on the back and say, well, Minister, you've solved the housing crisis. I understand that there's so many measures that you have to put in place to be able to provide that climate to build more affordable housing. And I've used, in terms of some of my zoning powers, we talked on the way here, my Chief of Staff and I've provided 5 minister zoning orders on 5 priorities of the government, either job creation, long-term care, or affordable housing. And I think part of what I had in those 5 cases was I had, in some cases, a region or a county and a lower tier municipality all sharing that same view as our government. So we were able to fast track some of those things and have a minister zoning order to tie it up so that it could be built faster and we could realize that benefit sooner. The one thing that we didn't move forward on, we had 5 themes during the Housing Supply Action Plan: speed, cost, mix, rent, and innovation. And while we did 4 innovation guides and we dealt with sort of the speed and the cost of the system, and we are continuing to work on our final posting for the community benefits charge regime, we didn't cover in a substantive way the rent side. And I talked this morning at the roundtable about, whether people rent or whether they pay a mortgage, it's their home. It's the rental accommodation. It's their home, regardless of whether it's a mortgage or a monthly check to a landlord. And I think we have to be very aware moving forward in the next plan for the Housing Supply Action Plan is to really speak to that person who rents, that's their home ownership. That's their place that they want to feel safe and secure, and they want to understand that there's a government that addresses that and understands that. There are a tremendous amount of great ideas out there when it comes to housing supply. We've seen, depending on the study that you've looked at, whether it be CMHC numbers or Urban Nation or RBC economics, we've seen, our purpose-built rental levels go back to, as early as 1992 levels. Mm-hmm. So while we've made some gains, there are still some very challenging vacancy rate numbers in communities, and I think we need to pull at all the stops to try to deal with a willing council. We met with some of our nonprofits last week, groups like Habitats for Humanity. They've got some tremendous ideas, already some existing partnerships with municipalities. They just need a provincial government that recognizes that it's an issue. And I'm in a place where I want to leverage every municipal dollar, every provincial dollar, and every federal dollar. And I'm actually proud that as minister, we were the first province or territory in the country that was able to sign on to a portable housing benefit with the federal government that goes actually with the person, that targets those most in need, people fleeing domestic violence, people fleeing human sex trafficking, vulnerable seniors, people who are homeless or at the risk of homeless. This is a big deal that we announced with the federal government, and it really didn't get as much uptake as I thought. And I think it's a real game changer. We're going to help, I'm hoping 5,000 families, 5,000 households this year for the year 1, but I'm looking forward to other provinces and territories seeing that a portable housing benefit is a great option with a willing federal government to help those that are most vulnerable. And I think that's something that I'm going to really continue to push this year.
Just follow up, you mentioned the community benefits charge. I think there's an interest in understanding both from the development community as well, the municipalities, where that's at. I think if I read it right, it's supposed to come into effect a year from now, January 1st, 2021.
Yes.
The regulations aren't quite out yet. Maybe give an update of what it is, why it's important, and whether the time frame is going to be right to make sure municipalities are ready for it.
Yeah, well, it's first of all, the timing is that dreaded four-letter word that ministers say, soon. So it is coming soon. I made a commitment to the large urban mayors in Guelph shortly after Royal Assent that I would give a significant amount of time for consultation. We had two very long environmental registry postings, but we received some great feedback, and we're very close to being able to post that last environmental registry to get that final feedback before that January 1st, 2021. I think we've received some very good feedback because people in the development industry wanted to have that certainty. They wanted to know going into building a project exactly what the costs were going to be. But at the same time, we heard from our municipal partners that they wanted to have that certainty. And in fact, we got great feedback from municipalities about what they value those soft services, but also the hard services that the old development charge regime paid for, that they wanted included in the new community benefits charge. So it is all about balance, but no one can say in the municipal sector, as they were worried in June, that we were basically going to do Royal Assent and they were going to get about 30 days and the new system was going to be in. We've given them a longer runway than I think the development industry thought I would give, but at the end of the day, I'm very confident that people will be happy with where we've landed on what is 100% recoverable from the new DC regime of community benefits charge. But it's that dreaded ministerial four-letter word of soon.
I just want to talk about municipal reform more broadly. I spent 7 years on council, chaired finance. Obviously, you're a former mayor and CAO. Some of the things that frustrate me, and I know some of the CAOs may agree with this, I know a couple of them don't, but I just wonder about how we modernize the Municipal Act as a whole. There are some things where we want to say, and the business community is saying, we want to have the ability to work collaboratively with municipalities. Think about a capital budget and say if it's not a 10-year capital budget and you can't front end like a contractor or an organization saying we'll help put the infrastructure in the ground if we can move or expedite our project. There's very little ability for there to be creative and what I would say collaborative solutions based on what the prohibitive elements in the Municipal Act. So I'm wondering, how do we try, if we want to have business working together with municipalities, working together with community, and be able to understand that government can't do all of what it needs to do. How do we modernize the Municipal Act, whether it's through community benefit agreements or, I'm not sure what the mechanisms are. Are you looking at that? Because there needs to be an enhanced role for business to make investments to create the platform so we can create jobs and economic prosperity.
Yeah, I do believe that those funds, the Audit and Accountability Fund and the Municipal Modernization Fund, do give the community an opportunity to give feedback to their local council on a particular service delivery or a particular way they do business that could be looked at in a different lens. Obviously, those rural townships that I spoke about earlier saw the need here in the region to do a service delivery review on how they do business. So there's some fantastic examples out there of communities that are doing that. But I do think we are making gains. One of the things that we did right at the very start of our government was do things differently than the previous government, and we decided to move forward on fair and open tendering as an opportunity to signal to municipalities that we understand the challenging fiscal environment that they're under, and we think that you should always look to get the best value for your taxpayers' dollars. You shouldn't pay 20% more for a municipal project, but at the same time, municipalities should feel free to be able to sit down with their neighbors or with their own staff and look at how they do business and look at something with a different lens. And if the chamber can be that conduit, then I don't think anybody should be afraid to have that conversation. As a CAO, prior to my election as MPP, it used to drive me crazy when we heard that this is the way we've always done it, this is the way it's always been done, and I don't buy that. I think there's always opportunity to look at things differently with a lens of providing the best quality program to taxpayers. I'll put some of the work that municipal politicians in our province put up against anybody else, but at the same time, we all need to have that calm, open conversation that we can always do better. And we can always do better at the province. And I think now we have a situation where on some common goals like transit, like housing, we've got all three levels of government working together in the right place, and we got to take advantage of it. We'd be crazy not to take advantage of it.
So, last question. Provincial budget's coming up. One of the things that I think we always hear, certainly, there's a great need for service delivery and new tools for municipalities. Are you considering new tools or new revenue sources for municipalities? I'm thinking municipal land transfer tax. Are there other things that you're considering, so that there are the tools available to municipalities, particularly as a growing community? The old tools don't fit for a fast-growing municipality like our 4 townships and three cities. What are some of those new things you're looking at or are considering in terms of budget?
Yeah, I've not been a big fan of extra revenue tools, and I think people who know me know that I prioritize programs like the two I've talked about that do the opposite of providing more revenue tools, but just make your municipality more efficient, more effective, more collaborative with neighbors. I truly believe that $350 million that we provided the 444 municipalities and whatever program offering we gave gives them a great opportunity to build that capacity by looking at how they do business, as opposed to me just giving them a tool to raise more money. I don't always think that that's plus the other reason is I railed against it when I was in opposition. I was the poster child for not extending the municipal land transfer tax farther than the City of Toronto. So I think I've got some. Mayor McGarry knows when she was MPP McGarry the type of diatribes I gave in the House. So yes, we miss those. Yes, for sure you do. So my focus is going to be on those efficiency, effectiveness piece to try to have councils look at those line by line reviews and also be more collaborative. I think there's a lot of work that way.
Listen, that's all the time we have today. I want to thank the Minister on behalf of the group and the Greater KW Chamber and all our sponsors and guests today. I'd like to thank you for your time today. As a token of our appreciation, we'd like to give you a copy of County Roots Global Reach, which highlights the innovation and economic development from a business perspective that is part and parcel of the region's success. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for having me, and you're always so very accommodating. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Just hang tight for just a second. Just finish up.
Just as we wrap up, I'd like to thank today's sponsors again, our community partners, Communitech, for hosting us today, and Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, our presenting sponsor, Manulife, our gold sponsor, OpenText, our silver sponsors, Clack and Google, our bronze sponsors, Gowling, WLG, KPMG, and Progressive Contractors Association, and our hosts for today's, for their hospitality, both Communitech and Bingamans. And of course, to all of you, thank you for attending today and for your continued support. Don't forget to join us for some other events that are upcoming. The 2020 Business Excellence Award Galas next week on Thursday, February 20th at Bingaman's. I've literally got 2 or 3 tickets left. If you haven't got one, there'll be over 900 people in attendance. We're also partnering with the Toronto Region Board of Trade and the Hamilton Board of Trade to bring the 3rd annual Canada's Innovation Corridor Summit to Waterloo Region on April the 29th. The focus being talent fueling the innovation corridor. There's more details for every event. For that and others, go to greaterkwchamber.com. And finally, the Chamber is looking to expand our business development team. If you know somebody who is passionate about the community and helping businesses grow, please refer them to our website. We'd love to talk with them. On your way out, please leave your name tag at the registration desk so we can recycle it for future use. Have a great afternoon.